And
Silence ensues as we all wait to see what happens next.
yeah, I'll try sending out another invite.
Okay.
Oh, I see Keith.
There's Keith. All right.
Let's see.
Maybe he can describe it to Nicole.
Yeah. Keith, how did you get on?
So finally, just a second ago, I actually saw a pop-up under events. I actually got the invite that said click here to join. Up until then, all of the options I had just said click here to watch it, but then it said it wasn't live yet. So I don't know if you sent out a different invite or something like that.
I tried again after I made it live, but hopefully Nicole can join.
Let's see. Yeah. I just got Keith's text saying it's not live yet. That was a few minutes ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that was. That's okay.
Yeah, it even I even clicked on a YouTube link and it said please stand by.
Yeah, we definitely want to avoid the YouTube links.
Yes.
No more echoes.
No more perpetual loop.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
there's Nicole.
Hey, sorry, my computer was being stupid.
No, you're good. Okay. Well, does somebody in particular want to be the group leader and lead the discussion for this week?
I could this week if you want me to.
Cool.
I'll do the I'll make some notes. Let me make sure I have a piece of paper.
All right. I'm glad somebody else volunteered. I've been doing service projects every night this week, and I'm scrambling to catch up on homework.
Yeah, I work tomorrow and I have a test that I still have to take on Saturday, so.
That's fine. I got it. Okay. So everybody did the reading for this.
Yeah.
The Lone Star, and then the note on sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So our first question on the our discussion is that so I go to the discussion prep? Is that what I do?
No, the next link down should be for the leaders.
Okay, so then you do Then you ask to help you understand the background. Okay, so first what is the background on the sexual harassment law before you start the case? Do you help you understand? Okay. All right. I don't understand what I'm doing. Okay, so first, I guess, what is sexual harassment? Anybody?
I'm trying to figure out where you're reading from.
Where I'm reading from?
Yeah, just so that because it's broken down into parts, right?
Yeah, so part one, I'm under Okay. I am under the. Okay, wait. Do we do the writing assignment? Is that what it-
Discussion prep.
Should be discussion prep, discussion leader only.
discussion leader only? Okay.
So
got-
we've broken into a whole bunch of parts. That way we can follow where in the reading we all want to pull from.
Okay. So part 1, sexual harassment background.
You're looking at next week.
What? Just kidding. I was skipping ahead.
I was going to say, I don't remember reading about sexual harassment. I remember reading about discrimination.
Dang. So I
Yeah,
moved way
this is
too far.
diversity week.
Fabulous. That's great.
Next week, I'll have some fun stories to share with you guys.
Yeah, me too.
Good questions on sexual harassment because I'm having a situation at work. Dang, let's go to diversity. Fantastic. Okay, so part 1. Ask a person one person at a time to explain one of each of the 3 diversity paradigms described in Making Differences Matter. Assimilation, differentiation, integration, and explain the paradigm. So, does somebody want to start, or do you want me to just say a name and then explain what the paradigms are?
We can just jump into it. I think that there was 3 in this one, right? We have the discrimination and fairness paradigm,
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
and then that one was just talking about. I guess most people look at it this way, right? The leaders kind of focus on fair treatment, everything's equal. They don't really utilize people's differences. They just try to lump a whole bunch of people that are the same together and then you can perform the same way. So it kind of like cancels the point of having a diverse work group.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. They kind of they're meeting the minimum requirements of the law for diversity for equal opportunity employment. So they hire a diverse group of people, but then they expect them all to think and act and follow this
Really
culture.
utilizing the point of how that can really help your company out. I thought that was interesting in some of the case studies you were reading for that guy from Cambodia that came over and they're like, well, if you can get everybody, all the Cambodian people in our community to join our bank, then you'll get promoted. I was like, what? That's not why you hire people with cultural backgrounds to blackmail them into the stereotype that they somehow are connected with everybody else of that culture and nationality. Like, I just thought that was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But apparently that happened, so.
And that kind of leads into the next paradigm, which is, pigeonholing people. You're the Cambodian, so we're going to assign you to the Cambodian market. You're the Hispanic, so we're going to have you pursue all the Hispanic clients.
Yeah.
Right.
So they hire for diversity, but they utilize it and pigeonhole them, but they don't maximize the opportunity there.
That was the access and legitimacy one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I even thought the example they gave in the text was kind of laid it out in black and white that they hired the European teams for that international bank, but then they didn't really know how they were doing it, so they hadn't improved at all as a company, just
Mhm.
because they hired people to do it that way. That if those people quit, that they would just lose a ton of money. They didn't learn anything from the experience and how to compensate and grow.
Right.
I think that's a valuable lesson, not just when you're talking about diversity, but I think in a lot of companies, when you have a very specific skill set given to a group of people, you kind of paint yourself into a corner. What happens if they all win the lottery and the next day they leave or something like that? It's if you haven't invested any amount of time to understand what it is they're doing, you're gonna kind of shoot yourself in the foot, in the off chance that they all leave all of a sudden.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it really feeds into what we were learning about last week too with Elder Bednar. Like, There's one end of it where you have to be learning from everybody around you, and then on the retrospective end of what he was talking about is you have to teach everybody what you know. So the responsibility is not just on one person. We need to be learning from others and taking the time to teach others.
Yes. Was there more there? Okay. We went through
So
assimilation.
there's a third paradigm now.
Yes.
That was the emerging paradigm, right? About
emerging paradigm, connecting diversity to work perspectives. Right?
yeah.
I did not get to that part in the reading, so someone will have to fill me in.
I read it back on like Monday. I think that this is like the one that like they had done research on, and it was a combination of like pulling together the best aspects. Like you have to hire people, you have to train them, you have to use their strengths in order to attract the right kind of business. They're talking about hiring lawyers that were of different nationalities that attracted different types of cases that they were more comfortable in. And because they had a whole different types of case inflow, they had different types of people that were attracted to not only their services but then other employees. And so they played to their strengths and grew as a like law firm because of it. Because like if you just have a whole bunch of, they were saying white Caucasian males that are only good at a certain type of case, and they all kind of help each other with it, then nobody wants to kind of go outside their comfort zone. And by hiring different minorities or nationalities or whatever, genders, they all have different niches, and then they can contribute as a group and kind of help expand their horizon. That's kind of like what I got out of it.
Yeah, something that stood out to me too, specifically around that case of the was it the law firm that hired the Latina girl?
Yeah.
Is not only having a diverse culture, but also having a leadership that's willing to listen to other ideas. Because you can have as diverse of a organization as you want, but if leadership's unwilling to even listen to other ideas, then you could have one specific ethnicity running the company, but you're not going to go anywhere.
That's a huge point.
Right. Okay, so is that all? That was all three of those diversity paradigms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Give an example of an organization you have observed or worked for that shows some aspect of a paradigm you choose. Explain whether you think the paradigm was effective for the organization. Okay. So,
I think that a lot of companies try to integrate, but they're not open to listening to new ideas, especially like chains like Home Depot and stuff where they have a set requirement because they're so monitored. Like I used to work for Home Depot, and I feel like they hired a lot of different backgrounds, but it was the same training, the same rubric, the same goal setting that was across the board. So it didn't really matter what nationality where they were. We were all kind of like, I don't know, we filled a slot, if that makes sense.
Expected to be little drones.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you spoke Spanish, that was great. They got to outreach to like that part, like bilingual skills were awesome. But when it came to like really contributing to like better ideas or quality control and that kind of thing, it was no point. It was all done from a corporate level, and they didn't want to hear anybody's ideas at that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I worked for them too for a while. Yeah, they're a very top down corporation.
I bet it's easy to do when you're that big,
Mm-hmm.
chain company. For uniformity, it's easier to do it that way, but it kind of, you miss out on some opportunities for sure.
So for Home Depot, are we saying that their paradigm would be more like the discrimination and fairness?
Yeah. Everyone's equal.
Right.
Everyone's equal.
So when I go and write this up, I just wanted to make sure that I was getting exactly what you were saying.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. I have only ever worked in healthcare, and so I don't really know what I don't really know what paradigm would fit.
I'm in I work in a hospital now, and I'm trying to figure out what paradigm works there.
Right. That's what I was trying to.
Well, I mean, it depends on how big the structure is. I mean, I live in a rural community that's about an hour away from the border of Mexico. They really push bilingual skills. They really push having a stronger Latino workforce because that's the greater part of the community that they're serving. I don't necessarily think that they're not just one strict paradigm. I don't think that they necessarily are perfectly integrated like they're supposed to be. They definitely have some of that everybody's equal, everybody's the same. But I can definitely see a push that they want to be relatable to the community. Like, a lot of the positions you can't even apply for unless you're bilingual. And, like, part of my on-the-job training is that a lot of the nurses are always telling me how to say things in Spanish, and I have lots of opportunities to practice. So it's kind of like pushy in that aspect. But I'm not sure if from all the different facilities I've worked at, that there was one that really fit one solid paradigm.
So it sounds like from where you're at, they're more of the second paradigm where they're trying to take advantage of a cultural, group.
Right.
So they lean that way because of necessity, but they might also be willing to integrate and use more or other cultural ideas as well.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, all of my upper management are all Latinos. Like, my department supervisor, all of the major nurses in my, like, department heads, and then the management over it. Like, Spawn, I work for Christus Spawn. It's a Catholic hospital that was founded in southern Texas. And so the only chains we have are in this community, and it started back before the borders had all changed. So I think a lot of them were in Mexico before, I don't know, just everything was said and done. They did the whole thing in orientation. But they definitely, I mean, I work with a very diverse staff. There's only one other tech in my department, and he's African American and doesn't speak Spanish. So I can tell that they still go with the whole, I just think that they're both. They definitely are trying to exploit the fact that a big part of our community is Spanish speaking only and Latinos. But I can also see how, like, when I'm at work, they're trying to say that everybody's equal, but here are some opportunities for you to practice your Spanish and make yourself more useful. Like, does that make sense? So maybe they're integrated. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it at work. They don't listen to other people's ideas because all of the management are all Latinos. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So really they're more heavily on the second paradigm, and with a little bit of that. Everybody's equal, but there's no way for that to occur where you're at because of the population that you deal with. It's just kind of something that they had to fall into just because of the population.
Yeah, I also kind of feel like with the second one, I think of a whole bunch of white guys that are exploiting the Cambodian to seek the Cambodian community, but in this case, it's the Latinos looking at the Latino community. Right. So, in a way, it's kind of more the first one, in my opinion, just because they're trying to integrate everybody into their culture and they're the majority, if that makes sense. Like, I get how it definitely is a mixture of both of them, which is why I commented on it. But because it's one type of people seeking the same type of people, it doesn't so much seem like exploiting themselves necessarily. It just seems like that's their target because that's their culture and their community. I don't know if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So it is almost more like they're the assimilation culture. It's just
they just happen to be assimilating non-Latinos.
Gotcha.
Okay.
It's just weird because they're not usually the ones in charge, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense.
They're definitely in charge.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, I can't think of an instance where third paradigm is being used?
I think, not a company I've worked for, but from companies I've studied over the last 3 years, you've got like Google is probably a huge one there, where they
Oh yeah.
huge diversity, and they want everybody thinking outside the box as much as they can.
That's
Just-
true.
I think Google is probably one of the biggest companies there for diversity. There's another company called Box that's out there. That's like an IT solutions company out of Silicon Valley, where they're so off the wall that they literally have different types of boardrooms for the different types of learning teams. So if you're in a team that has to sit with a PowerPoint presentation, there's a boardroom for that. If you're the kind of team that
Wow.
wants to write on the glass walls in the room, then they have a room with dry erase walls, and you just write all over everywhere. So there are those companies out there that have kind of embraced as much diversity in thinking and culture as they can, because they've realized that that's where it's a global market now, and that's the only way that they're going to reach a global audience.
That's so true. I noticed that too in my last workplace. One of my the other medical assistants, her husband was in a management position in a place like that, and they had team building exercises almost weekly at their office, and like they had an Xbox in there that they used, like a ping pong table, and that was like part of work, that they would take breaks, like the management would have to go and grab people and do like one-on-ones where they played a game with them and got to know them better, and like picked their brain about ideas that were coming up in a more casual way. Like I never heard of anything like that.
That's like the place I work right now.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Lucky.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Nicole. You haven't said much.
Sorry. So when I thought of diversity, I thought of my first workplace, which was I worked in an amusement park in Chicago. So they had people of all different races, of all different ages, of all different backgrounds, and somehow we made it work. I worked with Hispanics, I worked with African Americans, I worked with white people, I worked with gangbangers who turned their life around. I worked with everybody, and we somehow incorporated all of our lifestyles. That way we could serve everybody, because we did serve a really diverse population. So yeah, I just was thinking of that, and how, when you work 60 hours a week with people, you get to know them, and you get to learn that sometimes their way is the better way. And we would do team building activities where we would go ride the rides at night. The
Oh,
park
yeah.
would open up the park, and they would keep it open for all of us to work. The like full-time people would work, and we would get to go ride rides all night.
It reminds me of when I worked at Disney World, and then at Disney you have a lot of religious and just other roadblocks. Like I think that most of the entertainment staff were homosexuals, and just really open about it. And they even have insurance policies at Disney where if your significant other it doesn't have to be a spouse, it can be a life partner. So they opened it up for that, where they were really inviting different cultures and embracing of their talents in that aspect, and trying to make their workplace more accessible. And I don't know, people are obviously interested in stuff like that for benefit packages, and it definitely works. Playing on people's strengths instead of what's different about them, for sure.
Right.
They have all types of nationalities. The Epcot, they bring in all international people for business internships or whatever kind of a work experience they want. You go into Epcot in the French bakery, and they're all from France. They all speak French. They all have a heavy accent. They're all authentic things that you get there. But they integrate all these different cultures into an experience for their guests, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Those are good examples of that for sure. That helps me to kind of figure out how to write this down. So thank you guys both for your thoughts. Do you think we've covered all of them?
I think we can move on to that next topic.
Yeah,
So number 3, Melody Hobson says colorblindness is dangerous. Do you agree? Is she making a point similar to the one made by the authors of Making Differences Matter?
I think she definitely has the same viewpoint of the integration. Um, in her spiel, she was very blatant in the fact that we don't need to be all equal, that we need to be embracing the differences in each other. I think she complements the integration part.
Okay.
Did anybody else watch that?
I was in the middle of watching it when we began, so I didn't get it really a chance to get into it too far.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I don't know, to me it's kind of one of those things that when you hear it, it's more of an idealistic way to approach things just because racial stuff is such a sensitive issue for the minority. And so I feel like they are more at liberty to kind of take that stance than the majority sometimes. Does that make sense? Not like in a mean way, but like...
Well, I think it's really interesting because just hearing all the conversations that we're having, I think it really varies from industry to industry because I work in the IT industry, and you guys were mentioning Google and Box, and my company is very much like that, and we don't have a problem with that. I mean, I know that I work with a black guy, and it's like it doesn't even cross our mind that he's a black guy. What's his opinion must be different than mine, and we just don't see and interact with each other like that. It's just a non-issue, and listening to her talk, and she must work with politics, and she works in finance, and so I think that their corporate structure is so incredibly different than the corporate structure that I'm in, that must be an issue for them.
Yeah, I feel really similarly. Like I said, the only other tech is an African American guy, and he's one of the chillest guys I've like. Race is not an issue whatsoever. He speaks out. Everybody respects him. Like he's a retired Navy corpsman. Like the guy's hardcore. Everybody respects him. Like. Yeah. And I feel like some of her approaches almost make, at least in my work situation, I think it would make it more problematic than beneficial because there's already a good flow. Does that make sense?
Yep. I think sometimes she's saying that colorblindness is dangerous, but I also think that it's not something you can completely ignore, but and that's the only time. Okay, so my mom works in schools, and one day she had to go to a seminar on racism, and the lady was asking her, when does race enter into your job? And she's like, when I have to go to some sort of meeting on racism, because if it's not an issue unless it becomes an issue.
Exactly.
And, right, so it's not necessary. I don't agree that that colorblindness is dangerous. What I think is that if you ignore that there could be issues, and when there are issues and you don't address them, that's more dangerous than just saying, well, it's a complete, race is one thing, having a problem with people is something that has to be addressed. It's dealing with people, it's not necessarily, I don't think it, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I also think that a lot of her examples are people that are basing stereotypes and reflecting that in their behavior. I think that if you see anybody that comes into the room and say, oh, you must be the kitchen help, like her experience, then you're the one with a problem. It's not necessarily anything to do, it's a stereotypical thing that we slap onto things. It may not have had anything to do with the fact that they're totally racist, if that makes sense. So we need to be watching what our predisposition is on either certain races or genders or whatever it is, and suppress that and be professional and learn from each other.
Right. We'll go to number 4. Is colorblindness the same thing as discrimination and the fairness assimilation paradigm? For this one, this is a situation that happened at my work, and I had a healthcare administrator in training, and she was doing her internship, and my administrator asked her to, one day she worked with activities, one day she worked with the CNAs, one day she worked with housekeeping, and with the day she worked with housekeeping, we asked her how it was going, and she was a very well put together woman, and working in housekeeping was very hard for her. And I was shocked when she said, I went to school so I wouldn't have to do these types of jobs. And I felt like she was discriminating against those who were her subordinates, And so it's not, colorblindness and discrimination are not the same thing, because you can be discriminated because of your job title or where you are, not necessarily your race.
I agree.
So, anyways. Anybody have anything else to say on number 4?
I think you did a good job.
Thank you. Why do the authors of Making Differences Matter believe that integration learning and effectiveness paradigm is the best approach to diversity in the workplace? Do you agree or not agree?
It's the only one where people can learn from each other and grow as a company and as people. I think you can't use people, and you can't just slap a label on everybody and expect to grow. I think that it is the best one. It's also the hardest one to implement because everybody has to be on board, especially management. I think that you have to be open to ideas, but you also have to be able to nip things in the butt as things become confrontational or problematic. So you have to be like aggressive and on the defense, but also on the offense. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it takes a really strong team to be able to work like that. And that's why they're so successful, though, like things like Google and these IT places, is because they can see the vision and the benefits, but they can also implement it. So
I think a company like a hospital where I work will actually have a harder time implementing that on a full scale, because senior management is so entrenched in their mission and their vision that I don't know that they, especially the hospital I work for, I don't know that they're willing to give up their kind of the high ground they possess on mission and vision, and will be willing to accept alternative points of views.
yeah, I think that it's a little bit different with hospitals because it's so set in stone. We don't need to be evolving and changing. We just need to be finding better ways to provide that care. Mm-hmm. Like right now in the hospital system I work for, they hire out, it's a private company that does our admin, which I thought was weird, but apparently that's normal. So like when you come and register for the ER, that lady that takes down your insurance information and your copay and has you sign off that consent for treatment, they're not Christus Spawn employees, they're a company. And they're in a huge fight right now with our triage nurses because they want to do all their paperwork first and then let people get triaged, but it's backing us up. And I had an idea that a tech should come out there and do a preliminary thing just to get them in the computer and do vitals and then send them either to triage or to registration, just depending on their need to get triaged immediately or if they'd be fine to go get their paperwork done, just to kind of help control the wait times. Like we're at a hiring freeze because of our productivity and all this other stuff. And everyone was on board, but nobody wants to implement the change on the floor because we're so busy. And so we do have ideas, and people say that they're behind them, but nobody wants to take the time to send the tech out to go do their job and to sign that person in to take a few set of vitals because we're all barely surviving in the back. And so the problem is that with healthcare, making ideas is great and dandy, but you have to be willing to sacrifice the time to implement them, and healthcare has no time.
Or money. That's the other hard part.
Yeah.
They're
So.
not going to text me.
Well, our big thing is that we're not going to get more money and be able to hire more people unless we can get those numbers better. And it doesn't matter how many ideas people come up with, no one's willing to implement them because everyone feels like they're drowning. So,
Right.
super fun.
Okay. Let's move on to part 2, color bravery. What does Hobson mean about being color brave? Do you think color braveness what do you think it would look like in the workplace? Is it similar to the integration paradigm, or is she talking about something different? Not all at once.
I don't know. I didn't really necessarily agree with everything she was talking about, just with how proactive she wanted to be. I just think that it's making it more problematic than anything else by putting such an emphasis on it instead of just letting things progress as they're going to and deal with problems as you get to them.
Right.
But I don't know, that might just be me. I just feel like I had a really hard time connecting with what she was saying because I don't have those, I wasn't raised in that culture where I have all these underlining stereotypes and grudges
Right.
and all that.
So somebody sum up for me what she means by color bravery.
I think she essentially means you acknowledge that that there are differences in the company or in your given situation, and you just accept the fact that you're different and you attack it head on. You don't sidestep the fact that they're different. You come right out and say it.
Yeah.
I think a good example right now is I see it a lot in our culture, especially being a white male. It gets awkward to call a guy a black guy. It's like they're calling, and everybody uses the term African American, and now they're calling themselves black, and it's like it's like that whole what's the politically correct way to acknowledge that? And I think it's like, she just says just come out. Why does it matter? Just accept the fact that you're different, call it is what it is, and move on.
Yeah, it's not that you're being derogatory. It's just
It's like I think a lot of people they get very nervous with and maybe that's what she's trying to say. 'Cause I agree with Victoria that I have a hard time relating to having to be color brave because it's just not really an issue for me. But I think a lot of people struggle with what is the politically correct way to address this given situation. And I think you just need to say, you know what, we're in a situation, just call it what it is and move on.
See, I think of it as being LDS. When you grow up outside of the LDS culture, it's a lot like being color brave, because you have to stand up for yourself and you have to acknowledge that you are different from other people. But at the same time, I grew up in a place where I'm white and I was the minority. So sometimes I got treated differently because I was white. So I mean, it's not just for, Hispanics and African Americans. Sometimes it can be for white people where they are different.
I think the big thing is just how you acknowledge it. Like, I graduated from high school in Georgia. I went to what they call the old slave school. Anytime the air conditioner broke, it cost thousands of dollars because it was made of spare parts, and no one had ever replaced the thing and just put in a regular air conditioning system. But because I never acknowledged the fact that I felt different or I didn't feel awkward, it never became a problem. And I think that's I guess what we have to combat is that in situations where other people are going to make it awkward and it's going to be a problem for them, how are we going to deal with it? Because we can only control ourselves. And so if you work with somebody that's a different race, gender, nationality, and it's a problem for them or they don't like the way they're treated, then you have to combat it and be like, okay, we accept everybody's differences. This is how I feel. How can we make this work professionally? And sometimes you're not going to be the one with a problem, but you have to still be the one with a solution.
Right.
And a lot of that could just be as simple as, you just be honest. I don't want to offend you. Do you want me to call you black? Do you want me to call you African American? Do you want me to call you Latino? Do you want me to call you,
Should I just call you Johnny?
Yeah, yeah. If I'm referring to your physical appearance, what is not going to offend you?
Right.
I've got a guy that's I called him a Mexican one day, and he's like, "No, I'm a Texan." Like, okay,
Okay.
I can call you a Texan. I get it.
Yeah.
I think that you've all made some really good points on that. Let's go to number 2. The authors of Making Differences Matter explain that some managers are more comfortable addressing problems with outright discrimination than more subtle diversity problems. Have you ever been in a team, group, or organization where one person's ideas or approach to doing work was hard for the rest of the group to understand because of the difference in background, experience, gender, race, or something else? And I will start because I worked with a true African male. He was from Africa, and I was new, and in their culture, women don't tell black men, they're men, they don't tell men what to do. And I was a white woman, and I was asking him to do something, and I deeply offended him. And it was a subtle thing, and it wasn't like I didn't know, I had no idea. I was my first day, so I had no clue on how to approach somebody. Particularly of his, his background, and it was something that somebody had to say, hey, it might be easier if you ask one of the head nurses to ask him to do those things rather than directly asking him, because though he's equal to you in your title, he'll probably would rather hear it from his supervisor nurse than hear it from, you. So, that's how we dealt with it. Sometimes you just have to make adjustments because that's what somebody's used to. And once I understood that, it was fine, but I did have to make an adjustment. Sometimes you gotta do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely an extreme example. Holy crap. I don't know. I don't know how I would. I don't know how I would react in that situation, but.
Well, he was deeply offended, like to the point where I was like, I don't even understand what I did. So that I had this nurse who was just like, this is just not. She was African as well. She's like, this is just not our culture. She's like, that's not how we do it. So it was just something I had to learn.
That's something that
forward.
That I feel like I really need to learn to appreciate, because in circumstances like that, I'm always like, well, we should help them integrate because that's not okay behavior. But at the same time, you don't want people trying to change you in the workplace, even though it could probably make you a better worker and employee and just person. Like, I liked that example that in the case studies that we were reading this week about how all the team building exercises were around alcohol, and that this guy religiously was totally opposed to that. And the company kind of held it against him that he wouldn't go to these social settings. Even if he didn't want to drink, why couldn't he just hang out with a whole bunch of people drinking? And that just seems ridiculous, too. So I think it's interesting that you can still work with just about anybody in any situation, but there is a right and a wrong way to approach it.
Yep. Anybody have any other situations where, there was diversity issues?
I worked on a project several years ago in Germany, and we had to learn very quickly how the Germans handle their day-to-day business. Their work hours are very different, and they take a lot of coffee breaks. And we actually started holding meetings around the coffee table, and yeah, it was really funny. But that was a real it was a challenge, but it was a great learning experience on how you can take two completely different cultures and make them work together. We had to have a lot of patience because stuff just.
Yeah. You're still there?
on holiday. And it was ridiculous how many vacations these guys took. But I think it was a testament to I guess maybe how overworked we are as an American culture, so it was really nice, but it was definitely a challenge to work with them and accept that our project timeline was not going to be their project timeline.
Yeah, my friend from Argentina was always talking about, she's from there, she was born and raised for a little bit, and her whole family's back there. She kept talking about how they do siestas in the middle of the day, so from like noon to 2:30, all businesses are closed. Everybody goes and takes a nap.
You can't even buy a glass of water.
Yeah, and so I was like, man, we need to integrate that. And it has to be siesta time sometime in the U.S., even if it's just on Sundays or something. It's nap time, everyone.
I served my mission in Argentina. The first time I saw a siesta, I was floored. Because I was middle of the day, and I asked my companion, like, where can I, just get a drink of water? I'm thirsty. And he just starts laughing at me. He's like, dude, look around. There's not even a dog in the street. Everybody is asleep right now.
Yeah.
Spain is the same way. It was interesting because I worked on a American military base in Spain, and so all of the Americans would show up to work at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. They would take lunch at noon. They're off at 5. But the Spanish natives wouldn't show up to work until 10 or 11. Like, the only people, when we were driving to work, the only people out were moms taking their kids to school. And so people don't show up to work until like 10 or 11. They take a 2-hour lunch at around 2 or 3 o'clock, and they work until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And then dinner doesn't start until like 10 o'clock at night. And so like we'd be starving at 5 o'clock, and none of the restaurants would be serving dinner until later.
Wow.
Yeah. Definitely a different culture.
Yeah. So let's go to what could have been. What could have done in that situation to gain diversity of the group? I think that I think they meant in each situation that we were talking about as we went through. So we kind of have already gone over that, really.
I think.
And Nicole, you were the only one I didn't hear an example from. So do you, by chance, have an example of? I mean, I know you shared the. So what was something that you did that helped with the diversity where you worked in Chicago?
So we ended up having meetings pretty much every night, maybe every other night, depending on the week and how busy we were, but we would just talk about like what we could have done differently, what everybody wanted to do. We had a couple of trouble customers, so we talk about them and what their input was so that we could better serve the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was that a good example?
Yes.
I thought I have other ones.
No, that's perfect. That's how you overcame it, was with heading it straight on with the meetings. Many companies still have problems with outright discrimination. Have you ever worked or observed a company where there was outright discrimination problems? I have not ever had that problem.
I kind of have a crazy story. That it's not a place I work. So I told you guys I lived in Georgia. My dad got stationed at Fort Gillem, and the week we moved there, we had to go school clothes shopping, and we went to a shoe store. I don't remember which one it was, but there was a white guy at the counter checking people out and a black guy in front of us buying the shoes. And the cashier was arguing with the guy saying, no, I know you changed that price sticker. These shoes cost more than that. And the guy, this black guy that was buying the shoes, was like, no, like it was already on here. You, like, they were fighting. It was the most awkward situation ever. And we were from California. Like, there's not a race issue in California, like if we love everyone. And so my mom chimes in and she's like, it's actually like a federal law or state law or whatever that whatever something's priced at, you have to sell it at that price. He's like, I don't know why you're fighting with this guy. Like, if their shoes are marked at that price, you have to sell them. And she's talking to the white guy, and the black guy looks at her, and he's like, I don't need your help, cracker. And my mom put all of our stuff down and we walked out to the car and we went somewhere else. But it was just like, I think it just shows that there's dysfunction on every level of that, depending on the company, I guess. Like, you have to train your staff that you can't let that get in the way of your professionalism. Like, when you're in that uniform on the clock, you represent that company, not yourself, and you have to leave it at the door. But you obviously will be in situations where it can happen. People on both sides can be very sensitive and direct that they have a problem. And so I know that that's not like somewhere that I worked, but I was a shopper there, and it was super awkward.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting that the flat guy called, was it your mom a cracker?
Yep.
Because sometimes it's really hard for people to accept help.
It's true.
You know, maybe they think that you have alternative motives. Maybe they've never been treated with respect. And so, I mean, sometimes when you get treated badly, you kind of just have to think and be like, well, maybe they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're not used to this nice treatment, because sometimes people are mean.
I think we just have to not be naive, that people will come from different backgrounds and will have different problems than we do. And we have to have our wits about us in order to find resolution, conflict management, and all that.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Sorry, I know that was kind of like crazy.
Yeah,
It's not, as a customer, you can't really fix stuff like that, but I thought that will always stick with me. It's just one of the most awkward shopping experiences ever.
It would be awful.
I'd be so sad.
Definitely. My poor mom.
So, then, what did John Skipper, ESPN president, mean when he answered yes to the question, do we hire the minority or the person who is most qualified? Do you believe this is the right approach in hiring for diversity?
I'd like to believe that what he meant is that that go into the interview with an open mind and find the right person for the slot available, instead of just saying that, like, because when I first heard her in the video saying that, I was like, does she mean that the minorities always are the best ones for the job? Like, it was just kind of funnily worded. But I think that the point they were trying to make is that don't go in there with any predisposition of what we're looking for. Find the right person by interviewing them, like, and figuring them out. Let's have a full palette of options and find the right fit.
Okay.
Did anyone get anything else out of that?
I think it just meant sometimes you have to hire the minority, and sometimes you have to hire the person who's most qualified. And sometimes that's just a judgment call that a large corporation like ESPN would have to make, because that's just, there's so many things that have to do with minorities and hiring of whatever. Sometimes you just have to make those calls.
Well, I actually think it's not necessarily an either or situation. I think yes, sometimes the most qualified person is a minority, and sometimes the most qualified person isn't.
Right.
I think maybe that's more what he was saying, is that we hire them, you know. So sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I think that's one of the things about, you know, like that we were talking about the tech companies. It's not an issue for them.
Okay. I that makes more sense, actually.
I
Okay.
worded it. It was very straightforward.
Yes. Okay, let's go to part 4. Apparently there's no part 3. Elder Ballard describes a church council. Does the ward council he describes follow the integration paradigm? Explain.
Well, yeah, he wanted to pull out ideas from the different auxiliaries and use their opinions in order to help people. And so that's kind of what the integration was all about, is you hire a full spectrum of people, nationalities, genders, and you pull from their strengths to make your company better. And it's the same thing with a ward council.
Right.
You have to be able to listen to the ideas and then want to implement them.
Yes. Okay, I think that covers that one. What are the advantages to a bishop of counseling with the Elders Quorum president, Relief Society president, primary president, and others? I think it gives you a really diverse look at what's happening in the ward. You know, if you're only counseling with the Elders Quorum, you're only going to know what they want. And there's other parts of the ward that are not part of the Elders Quorum, or vice versa with Relief Society or primary. So meeting with all of them, that really helps get a good idea of what's going on in the ward as a whole, I think.
We all have different vantage points and different strengths that culminate a whole different perspective that sometimes we miss because of our own position. And so I think that you are less likely to miss things and find the best way to help people when you include all the different auxiliaries.
Well, and I think something else, another advantage is I think that a lot of times leaders, especially in church, it seems, they are not willing to delegate, and they they get really stressed out over their calling.
We lost you again, Keith.
Trusty, can you hear me?
I can now.
Am I back?
Yeah, start over. You glitched out somewhere in the middle.
Oh, weird. Okay. So I don't know where you guys.
You said they didn't like to delegate.
Yeah, so the leaders, they don't like to delegate, and they cause themselves their own stress. Not only are they not taking advantage of other ideas, but just being able to trust your auxiliaries to take an idea and run with it, I think is really key in being successful as a leader and surviving your calling. I think often I see a lot of Relief Society presidents and even Elders Quorum presidents that they burn themselves out because they take the whole weight of the task on their shoulders when you have counselors for a reason, you have a secretary for a reason. That's what they're there for.
I also think you deny people the opportunity to grow and to contribute. I think the big part of these callings is for us to learn something that I feel like as soon as you get a calling and you get good at it, it's when you get released. It gives you something else to do. And so I think that an important part of allowing other people to contribute is for their benefit as well, so that everybody can to grow and be better and be able to contribute more in the future.
Yeah.
It goes back to that talk that Elder Bednar gave 2 lessons ago about getting called as a stake president, and the general authority said his first job is to find his replacement or start training his replacement.
Yeah.
If we look look at each one of our callings that way, that we have an opportunity to train somebody up or give them more skills than they already have, share the authority.
I remember I had years ago when I took some classes on campus at BYU Idaho back when Elder Bednar was president. He came in and talked to us about the importance of leadership and delegation, and he said that if at any point in his leadership, if he had any papers on his desk, he was failing as a leader. Meaning that basically that all a leader should be doing is delegating and helping people rise to the occasion. That he should not have to necessarily do. And I don't know. I'm totally botching the way that he said it, but it was very interesting that as a leader you shouldn't have to be doing really any of the work. You should be directing the work.
Yeah, we shouldn't be the bottleneck.
Right.
Okay. I think we've already answered number 3. How could a bishop use diversity of his counselors to help the ward? But does anybody have anything to add to that?
Make sure it's not freezer burned.
I think it's good.
Okay. Have you seen bishops and other church leaders do this?
I think the ward that I'm in right now does a pretty good job of this. I've got our bishop's a banker. His first counselor is a orthopedic surgeon. His second counselor is like a fish and game officer that's in charge of the local fish and game department. All 3 of them are extremely busy. Plus the bishop's on the school board, other things like that. So I know our bishopric definitely hands off a lot of the responsibility and delegates down the line quite a bit.
Yeah.
Our bishop is a micromanager. I'm in the Young Women's Presidency, and every Wednesday he shows up, even though his kids aren't of that age group, and he makes sure that we start exactly at 6:30, and conducts the meeting from his seat, even though the kids are supposed to conduct it, and then leaves as soon as opening exercises is done, just to make sure that we start at exactly 6:30. I adore him. He's a good person, but he has quirks about stuff like that, and he definitely gets involved to make sure that they're done his way. So I think that you'll find a little bit of everything, and I think that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on how they need to grow in that position as well, and how things proceed from there. Maybe he's training his replacement by doing that. I don't know.
See, I've also had bishops that don't even show up for church.
I've never had that.
And so they just make so their counselors just do all the work.
Wow.
That'd be hard.
Huh. Okay.
That's one of those callings where he was put in there to grow and is not growing as he should.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes it tough.
I mean, when he showed up, he was amazing. It's a matter of him showing up.
Well, we all have our struggles, I guess.
Wow.
That's good.
Okay, let's go to part 5. The Making Differences Matter article assumes that there is some value to companies in promoting a diverse workforce. Agree? What are the advantages or disadvantages? So it's just what we've already talked about. Just make it Reader's Digest.
Yeah, I think that we've already really hit that one on the head.
Yep, I think we're good. And what approach would you take to have diversity as a manager?
I think Keith brought up some good points too. I think that we definitely need to leave any stereotypes and stuff at the door and just go into it with a better attitude. And then when problems arise, you fix it. But I think that we need to be able to listen to people's ideas and find ways to integrate that to make us better. I think we need to emulate the companies that we look up to. I think that if you like the way Google does things and you like how they make money and how successful they are, that you have to take a leaf out of their book.
Yeah, and I think for right now we're looking more on the typical versions of diversity that we talk about, race, gender, religion. But there's a lot of just personal cultural differences from person to person, region to region, that we can really pull from. I've got people that I work with that are complete homebodies. I've got people who are into extreme sports that I work with. There's a lot of different mentalities that you can pull from and gain insight from and say, okay, you're a super neat freak organizer at home. How can we use your skills here? You're really laid back at home and don't, nothing ruffles your feathers. How can we incorporate that kind of attitude into our workflow?
Yeah. We need to play to people's strengths and delegate wisely, follow up.
Hmm.
I think you actually have to care what the people that you work with say and how they feel, and listen. I think those are the most important things.
I think that's really key what you just said. I think leaders, executives, managers have a tendency to stop seeing people as people, and they see them as liabilities. They see them as disposable resources, and I think as soon as you cross that line, you start getting into that danger zone of, you just see problems start arising. The whole diversity thing. I think that's that line that you don't want to cross.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add?
Well, I'm glad that we did this. Can we meet on Tuesday next week?
We should. Yeah. I'm fine
Is
with that.
everyone cool with Tuesday?
Can we
Yes.
start 15 minutes later?
Sure.
Okay,
Even
sure.
5 minutes later? Just because I'm doing the biggest winter here on campus, and I don't get out of my meeting until 9
Okay.
tonight. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to get out.
Okay.
That would be fine.
That works for me. I may or may not be here Tuesday night. I'm on call. That's usually my night off, but I had to pick up a shift to cover somebody, so if I don't show up, I won't be there.
Okay.
Well, we can text you if that's handy for involvement. I don't know. Is there another night next week that you're off and that would work better?
I am off on Wednesday night, so no, it really won't work because
Okay.
I'm on call. I'm on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's
Now you're just busy. Okay, well, we'll try to make it work. Hopefully it's a chill night and you can participate. If not,
Hey, do you want to schedule that and send out the invite so it'll pop up and remind me?
yeah, of course. I can.
That'd be huge because if it's not in my calendar, I'm not gonna remember.
No problem. I'll send it to you guys right now. As soon as we
Okay.
I'm gonna post this on the community page.
That'd be
You're
awesome.
going to do that because I can't do that. So I
Yeah, I can
appreciate
totally
it if you
do
did.
that.
Fabulous. Thank you
Okay,
so
well,
much.
we'll see you guys all on Tuesday at 9:20 Mountain Standard Time. Does that sound good to everybody?
That sounds
Yep.
perfect.
Sounds great.
Okay, well, peace out, everyone.
all right. Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.